Hey, my name is Matt. I'm the author of the Aurora Incident Response Tool. And the reason I'm posting that video today is that I finally made the decision to make that tool open source. That's a request that I got very frequently from people who just want to add functionality, adopt the functionality, or whatever. So first of all, what is Aurora? So Aurora is, as the name says, an incident response tool, and it particularly helps you in tracking a case, an incident response case. And I'm not necessarily talking about a case in a sense of a security operations center where you get like many cases over the course of a day. It's more like tracking big incident and response investigations, the kind of stuff that you might find on the media. And essentially, Aurora is a spreadsheet of Doom on steroids. You probably heard about the spreadsheet of Doom if you ever went to the 458 class at SANS, because that's what we use there to track the progress of the investigation, track the artifacts, and finally have some basis to write the report on. We do use that tool in reality in our incident investigations at InfoGuard, and I also tried that tool on the SANS demo investigation. So the reason why I decided to write the tool is that I was not satisfied anymore with the spreadsheet of Doom alone for various reasons. One of them being that people need to be trained to use that more than to use a more strictly focused program like this one, because people tended to start adding fields to the Excel, removing fields, and all that stuff. So there was no like common format or something that would make reporting easy. And it was especially hard if you had to take over a case from a different person because that investigator went on vacation or something. And those are just some of the scenarios why I decided to write that tool. Um, so many people ask me why I'm not just using tools that are out there, like the Hive, for example. I often get the Hive, and I definitely love the Hive. It's just a different sort of tool. So the Hive is more focused on a per case basis, where a case is usually a very defined entity. So it probably is not very well suited to cover a case where you are an external entity going on site and the company you're investigating tells you that they recently had a breach and they saw different signs, and you need to investigate what machines the attacker has been on, what the attacker has potentially exfiltrated, kick the attacker out in a very orchestrated fashion, all these kind of things that follow the process model for incident response investigations. And for that, the Hive is probably not very well suited. I needed something different that works without preparation. I also wanted something that works when you work in a bunker somewhere in the Middle East or when you work in Antarctica. You probably do not have any kind of internet connection there. You might have a very limited amount of infrastructure that you can bring on site. And for these kind of cases, I also want to be prepared. Another thing that needs to work for me is that I need to have some offline capability. So I need to be able to bring a file on a flight, probably write the report during flight time without any need for internet connectivity. So this is another requirement that I definitely have for a tool like this. Having said that, I still want to retain some sort of multi-user capability because that's also needed. And I also want to have different users that do have the ability to write to that investigation spreadsheet. But let's get started with all of that. Okay. Um, oh, by the way, I forgot one more question that I frequently get. Is this enough for an investigation? Well, no, it's not. First of all, it's just a documentation tool. It does not get you any data from target systems or whatever. For that, there are different tools like Eric Zimmerman's CAPE tool, which is totally great, or many different EDR solutions. If you want to go open source, something to acquire artifacts from systems would be the Cancer project by Dave Hull. You will find the links in the description, by the way, to these tools. Um, So let's get started with that. First of all, if you want to follow along with that little demo here, you can download Aurora. Just go to the GitHub page mentioned in this description below, and you should see the release 0.6.2 at the time when you will see that video, and you can download that for macOS, for Windows, and for Linux. So it doesn't matter. It's an Electron app, so it's well, quite portable to the different platforms. For now, we do not do mobile, but that's on the roadmap, by the way. Okay, so let's get started. In the usual investigation that we do, we get either a call or an email or both. And the small case, I would just call it small case, that I'm going to present does have some capability to it. So the attacker, well, does know parts of the things he does, and it's a very common kind of a attack that happens, and it's based on various real cases that we did in the last couple of months. So just to keep it very actual. Okay, so what I already did is I opened that that program, and what I did is I already stored the file to a location. If you don't do that within the first 5 minutes, it will prompt you and ask you to save the file, so you don't lose any kind of thing. Okay, so on the left-hand side, let's start here. You have 3 different sections, whereas one is investigation, the next one is reporting, the last one is case management. Okay, you can basically set that up like you want. I, for example, like to start by adding an investigator. That would be me, for example. I just use the same thing here. The short name is just what shows up in the other tabs, by the way. So we're ready to go with that. Well, like, let's call myself engagement. Oops. Lead, for example. Okay, and then we can go. First of all, you have that timeline, and it's more like a master timeline. So when you investigate a signal system, we're talking about a super timeline, and that machine might give you various events. And I'm probably not going to put all of these events in here. We might have different tools for working on that, but I'll get to that at a later point. Okay, so what I usually do is, for example, if an attacker moves laterally and just looks around on a machine, then I probably put in the first time he connected to the machine and the last time. That might be enough if there is nothing more happening on the target machine. We have another tab that's called Investigated Systems. So there you put the machines that need a closer look. So as soon as I know that a machine needs a closer look, I put it there, and I put the reason there why it needs a closer look. I can assign it to a certain analyst. I can specify if I need a report for that, a separate report that I might attach to my final report, where I have all the details for that specific host in case someone is interested in these. Obviously, most clients will not be that interested in that level of detail, but you could specify it here. Then another one is malware and tools that specifies all the artifacts regarding malware or implants and all that. A question that I get very frequently is how to deal with PowerShell or other fileless malware, what they call it. Usually what we do is we do mention it here. And we refer it to the PowerShell process, whatever, and we keep the long payload that these fileless malware samples usually have. We keep that separate in the wiki if someone needs that. But here, I would call it like a phone book where everything goes together. I put in a short note, and that usually is enough for reporting, right? I might attach the full PowerShell payload in the end of the report, but to write the report and to understand what's going on, it's usually enough to just put the notes there, okay? Then compromised accounts. That's important because that file does not only serve me as an investigation lead, it also makes it easier for me to switch in people and switch them out. You know, incident response works like a consulting business a lot. And that means at sometimes you have people on the bench, they might have like 10 hours that they can contribute to that project, and then they will be out again. And that means that that you don't want to waste too much time onboarding these people to the investigation if they only have 10 hours to contribute. And if they just want to get like a general idea what's going on, they should be fine with only looking at the SOT. That's one of the main goals there. And one important thing is obviously the accounts that the attacker possesses at that point. Because, for example, if that person has 10 hours, he or she will probably get 1 or 2 machines to analyze more closely. And that means the analyst needs to know what to look for. And one of the things besides the malware and tools would be the compromised accounts. And obviously also pivot points that you might get out of the timeline or other infected machines. Then we also have network indicators for the same reason. We have exfiltration because especially in the current kind of attacks that are going on, many attackers threaten not only to encrypt your network. If that fails or you are able to recover without paying the ransom, they threaten you to release your data that they stole. So tracking exfiltration is very important, especially to the people who pay for the investigations, so aka C-level executives. And then there is a system tab. The system tab is basically like a backend database where you have a list of all the systems that you probably see with whatever solution you use, like your EDR or whatever. We even got it out of asset management, so even that works. Okay, the reason why I have that here and don't allow direct input of names here is that I want to prevent people from making typos, because that one is usually propagated as soon as we have tech rolled out. That one is usually propagated by some kind of solution, right? So I just import a list of host names, and that makes sure that no one makes typos in the other fields. That's very important because when I write the report, I do use filtering a lot. And if someone puts in a typo, filtering might lead to a situation where I miss something and I don't put it into the report, and that's never fun. Besides that, we have several reporting mechanisms that help you not only to write the final report, but also to walk your client through while the investigation is still going on. And we will get to that point a bit later, okay? Investigators, well, you saw that already because I put myself in. What I also use a lot is action items, especially when there are actions that require the customer's input, because incident response quickly can turn into a blaming game, and you don't want to be on the losing end of that. And for that reason, be very careful to track whatever tasks you assign to the client and when you did that, to make sure that you are not to blame if something goes wrong. And again, you should have the email correspondence as well, right? You don't want to store the email correspondence here, but that's just like your guidance when you go through it during your status reports, your weekly or daily or whatever you do status reports. Okay, and you can track those. And there are also some case notes that might help new analysts that you just switched into that project to understand more about the case. And frankly, we also put other stuff in there. For example, the attitude of different people on the client side, right? So, Mr. XYZ is usually very aggressive against us as an external party or something like that. Or this is Michael, he's super cool when it comes to Palo Alto firewalls or whatever. So that helps you to track this kind of information, and we use that as well. Up here, you obviously have a file tab. It looks absolutely the same on Windows, by the way, and on macOS. It's totally the same kind of GUI. So you can create new engagements. You can open an existing one. What I'm going to add is web dev support. That will come pretty soon to make it available on tablets. If you follow the the GitHub discussion on that, you know why I will need that for tablet versions. You can save the engagement, and as you can see down here on the left-hand side, the lower left-hand side, I have a lock with a key, and it says open. That means I'm currently allowed to edit that file. You've seen that because I added an investigator. What I can do here now is I could release the lock. As you can see, it's locked now, and I cannot add anything or remove anything. And after that, I can try to reclaim the lock, and now it's open again. So what we do is, and that's some sort of a compromise, because we want to keep it easy and we want to keep it file-based. Um, you can store that file on a file share currently on a Windows file share, and it will work. I mean, you can also use NFS. So whatever is presented to the operating system as a file system, you can use that, and many people can use that, but only one can have the lock, the right lock at any point in time. Okay, so that's the way how we do multi-user thing. We do have a chat in addition to that. So if someone just forgets to unlock it, you can just ping them on the chat. And that tool auto saves every 5 minutes. That means if, for example, someone goes to bed or something, you just need to wait 5 minutes and then you can force unlock the file because you can be sure, as long as that person is online, that the file has been updated. Okay. Under case configuration, you can put in data about the case. I usually start that pretty early on. Let's give that the case number 001. The client is any corp, whoever that is. And the start date, I would say, is today. And I would say unusual Citrix in followed by strange EDR alerts, something like that. I don't know. What you can configure here as well, and I'll get to that at a later point, is MISP data and virus total API keys, okay? But I'll get to that at a later point. Okay, so for now, let's just get started. We just had our first call with the client, and the client tells us something like, okay, we do have a Citrix infrastructure with some streaming servers behind that, terminal servers, and we realized that some person out of the Netherlands logged into the system at a time where that person was for sure not working, and from that point on, we did see some very strange behavior. Shortly after that, like 2 hours later, we got some alerts from our EDR that told us that someone tried to execute some malicious PowerShell code on a server. And we also got a strange alert from a client on the network. So we just want you to investigate. What we can say for now is we know that the IP address that person was logging in from was from a certain country, and the session for that person lasted like 10 hours. And in addition to that, on one of the machines that threw an alert, we also see some traffic going to a server in another country that looks strange because that server does not resolve back to any kind of hostname, something like that. Okay, so I would ask the customer, first question, do you have multi-factor? So in that case, my client says no, which makes it more likely that that probably someone stole the credentials, logged in, all that usual stuff that you are probably aware of anyhow. And I also asked the customer, you told me something about 2 IP addresses, right? That you already have. And the customer tells me, yes, I do have 2 IP addresses. And so I just add them here. And the client sends me those IP addresses via email. I have that prepared somewhere. Sorry for that. And I just copy that over. I need to mask those IP addresses. Sorry for that. The reason is they are real callback IP addresses, and I pick these because of the next step. And my next step, usually during the call already, will be that I check these IP addresses. I open Shodan. Please never scan attacker infrastructure, by the way. Okay, I just put that here and see what comes back. And what it tells me, so it appears to be something Windows-like because I have a terminal, something that looks like a terminal server running, but I also see another port that would be 550, and that is the default port for the Cobalt Strike team server. So it's very likely that there might be some Cobalt Strike stuff going on here. Okay, so I also gonna check the other IP address. That was number 1. So let's check number 2 as well. And this one comes back, probably not a Windows server this time, but it again has the Cobalt Strike team server port open. And this one is the server that was called back by one of the internal servers. Okay, so this is what I know so far. So that gives me an indication that really something is going on. And during the discussion, the next thing that I'm going to ask is, okay, you told me that the session was going on for a certain amount of time, right? So in that case, I just ask, when did the session start? What did you tell me? Let's say it was yesterday, and it was, by the way, I usually tend to keep it in UTC, but you just need to make sure that you know what time zone you're working in. And I say 8 p.m. UTC, okay? So 2000 here. And well, I don't put a time in here because I'm still talking on the phone. Don't put in an event system, I don't care. And I just put in begin Citrix session. Okay, that all works during talking. And I also put in the visible flag here. I'll get to that at the later point. And the person told me that the session was for 10 hours. That brings me to today at 6 in the morning UTC, if I'm not wrong. But I should have gotten that right. Okay, so let's keep it like that. And Citrix session. And now you can assume the client still has the window open, right, with all the logging data and all that stuff. So ask him, okay, you told me about a client, sorry, a user in the Netherlands. Okay, what was the username again? And I just put it in, any user one, for example. Okay, user used for Citrix session on the 23rd. Obviously, you might need to groom that stuff again, right? Okay, last activity, you can put that in. But what I would usually do is, I mean, I have the timestamps here already. So I would just take that and use that here real quick. Privileges is according to what they told me, a normal user. Or I just put in domain user. And you see that many of those tables have an attribution tag, an attribution column here. And the reason for that is there are many investigations where we find more than one attacker inside the network. And if we still want to track that in one investigation, it might make sense to attribute the different artifacts that you find to the different attackers in the network. If you can't do that. Okay, I can put in the domain any.net, for example. I don't know. I thought AnyCorp, I believe, was the name that I picked. AnyCorp.net, whatever. Okay, so that is pretty much what I could get out of that person in that call. So we're done on the phone, and the person promised me that he will send me all the data that's available for now in the next couple of minutes. Okay, so now I got time to work a bit more on that. And as I already said, there is no way to write something in here and keep it, right, as you can see. And the reason for that is I don't want the analysts to do that. I want to make sure that everything works on the system table. Obviously, at that point in the investigation, we do not have anything deployed at the client. But I know 3 systems that are involved already, right? So first of all, and I just put in a made up name here. So we have the Citrix server. Well, that's very generic, but that will do for now. I do not have an IP or anything, and we have 2 attacker servers that we can use here. So I just put in, okay, attacker, attacker RDP or Citrix. That's the server that the attacker used to for the Citrix session, and I got another one that would be attacker CS for Cobalt Strike. So if I want to, I can even get them out of the network tabs. So the first one that was, let me see. The first one is the one that was the Citrix session. And the second one that I have here, that was the Cobalt Strike one, right? And that's usually what I would do, just sort my thoughts after after the call. I do not have anything for the Citrix server, but I can start preparing already a lot of stuff. So I put in here, I don't put in anything here for now, but the connection here was on the Citrix server, right? And event system always means the system where you got the data from, right? So where you got the artifacts from, and the remote system is the other system involved in that kind of communication. And that's very important to understand, especially for people who did use the old version. We didn't have that back then. Event system is always the system where you did find the artifacts. Okay, so in both cases, that would be the Citrix server, and the remote system is the system that was on the other side of that deal. In both cases, the machine the attacker used for Citrix, and I can put in a direction now. And in both cases, the direction was from the attacker's Windows server to the Citrix server here, right? Something like that. And the reason why I'm doing that is that even at that point, we can start to visualize things. So first of all, we can look at a visual timeline. So that's not very cool because we just have the beginning of the Citrix session and the end of the Citrix session. So what the expectation of the client probably is to fill up the gap in between, what happened in between these 2 points in time. But at every single time, at every single point in time in the investigation, you can go back to that and show the customer visually what happened in that investigation, right? Or what you figured out already. There's also some sort of lateral movement tab. Oh, I didn't put that in. Even though it's not lateral movement, that will be fixed in a later version. I would put lateral movement in here because that's the way to get it into that tab. And then you see the first connection that the attacker did already. So from the attacker Citrix, Windows, whatever, to the Citrix server in the organization. And you also get an activity plot at which times you had activities from the client. But we will get to that at a later point. There is not much to show at that point. Okay, so now that we were talking about that, the client finally got us some data. And the data that the client got was, okay, first of all, we know the alerts. So one alert was on a client. So I'm already in my systems tab. On one client, that client has the host name client 354. I don't put in the domain name for now, and just to save time, I don't even ask him about the IP address because it might be DHCP anyhow. And we have one server. That was the other one where we got the alert from, SRV78, for example. Okay, those are new entities that I have in here. And those are the servers where we found the alerts on, or where the EDR solution found the alerts on. So the next step for me would be, okay, I definitely want someone to look at both of those systems. So I just go here and I need someone on the client. Summary, well, I just put in whatever I found in the EDR alert. Okay, analysis is required for that one. And I did not assign it yet because I'm the only analyst. Well, let's keep me busy and assign it to myself real quick. That's good. And we need a second investigation. We also need to look at the server here. And just put in the same description here because it doesn't matter. And also needs investigation. Let's assign it, but you know what? I don't want to do that case alone. So let's get a second investigator here. I don't put in a name, doesn't matter. And let's make sure that this guy works on that. Okay, first compromise, we might be able to fill that. So, you know, the Citrix session that started at 8 p.m., let's say this happened at 9 p.m., whatever. And this one happened at the same day at 10 p.m., something like that, okay? So now that we know that the timestamps already, I probably want to have that in the timeline, right? So I just put that in the timeline by right-clicking and adding that to the timeline because that propagates my timeline a little bit further. And as you can see, it puts in the follow-up flag here because depending on what you wrote here, it might need some more work, right, to put that correct in the timeline. So for me, it's okay now. So I get rid of the follow-up flag, and I want to see that in the visual timeline because now it starts to form like a progression here, right? So that's that here. We do not have yet any kind of direction or communication. So the next thing that we need to do is we need to get forensic data for these machines. Let's assume we are not at that point where we rolled out our incident response solution. So let's assume they just got us a CAPE acquisition for those systems, and investigator number one and myself start working on that whole thing. So what we figure out here on these systems is that they definitely have different malware on them, right? So let's pick one here. This one is from my machine, from the client. It has somewhere in the user folder a file called bitsexploit.exe. So, and the path on the disk is c /win /temp. So that's where that file is located. Creation date, let's say that the alert was at 9, right? So let's say that was shortly after or shortly before 9. I don't put in the last modified for now, just to save time, and this is on the client. And I do not have a hash. I did not prepare any hash. I could get one. If I put one here, you could right click and say check VT if you put in an API key, but I didn't, so I can't do that, and it will give you the VT results here. That would mean gray means it's not checked yet. Blue means it was checked against VirusTotal, but VirusTotal did not have any results. Red means it came back with negative results, so with detected infections, and green means it came back without any infections on the tested AVs. So I'm usually most interested in the blue ones, to be honest, because they are the most interesting ones in investigations. And I can put in probably priv ask exploit or something here. So just a note to myself here. That will show up nowhere other than in this tool here. Okay, so that's how we would start tracking that. I would definitely say now at that point, okay, the verdict for the client, it's infected. Let's say, okay, I skipped the in progress because I'm so fast doing that, and it's completed now. So I'm in control of that all the time, what people are doing here. Okay, so that would be how you would proceed. And now let's fast forward a little bit and add some more things with only to the timeline without doing anything here. And for that, we need some more systems that we potentially investigated. So I put in like 1 or 2 more servers. Let's put another one here. Well, I don't mind that much. And let's put in one here. SRV01, doesn't matter. Okay, let's work with that. And let's go to the timeline with that then. Okay, so what we figured out is that when the attacker used that Citrix server, the attacker streamed an application, and that application was MSTSC, so the remote desktop client. And when we looked at the terminal server that provided that MSTSC session here, right? And that would be, let me add the line. Well, let me add it to the investigated systems first, so we know what it is. So the server 45 would be server streaming mstsc.exe, and we're probably interested at that point where the connections were going from that server, right? So, and I just put that in the timeline here. I know I'm doing it a bit fast, but it's just for you to see how it works, right? So we said the 45 is this server, and from that server, that attacker was jumping to the 12, which is some server, I don't know, I don't care. At that point, the attacker was also jumping to 78, and the attacker was also jumping to 2 more machines, one of them being 354, and the other one being SRV01, which happens to be the domain controller. Okay, and these are the systems that we could look at. Sorry, I made a mistake now. Not even using my own tool, right? We got that information from 45, right? Sorry, we got it from, no, we got it from 40. It was correct, sorry. It was correct because we investigated that machine and that gave us the information, right? So I did it wrong here. That was the mistake. Which one did I have here? Oh, no, sorry, we had that already. This was, I believe, the client, and this SRV01 is a domain controller. Let's put it that way. I'm not putting a lot of stuff in here. I just want to show you one more feature. As I said, event system is always the one that where you got the evidence from. And in that case, that could be like some of the remote desktop logs. It could be the RDP MRUs or whatever artifact you took for that one. And the direction was outbound from the terminal server. And this direction, something like this. And that obviously makes the letter, oops, sorry, I need to put in letter movement here. I forgot about that. I don't care about the time at that point. In reality, obviously, I would be totally interested in the timing as well. I just want to show you the letter movement tab when it's a little bit more propagated here. Oops. Okay. So now that's what we have here. Attacker Citrix. And obviously, I put in something wrong here. Sorry for that. Oh, I did. So, oh, sorry. That was obviously from 45. And I forgot one jump, right? I need to add one more jump because we know that the application, the MSDSC application that runs on SRV45 was actually coming from the attacker Citrix server, right? So we got that out of the Citrix server's logs. We figured out with those what server they were going to, right? Or what server was streaming for them. In that case, the direction is this one. Again, and I think now it makes more sense. So attacker was going in using Citrix. Obviously, I got the direction wrong for that one. From Citrix, the attacker jumped to server 45, and from 45, the attacker jumped to various machines within the network. Okay, so that's this point of the investigation. Now, on one of the servers, we figured out. Let's take let's take the exfil time somewhere close to when they left the network again. Let's put it at 4 a.m. for example, and let's assume they staged their stuff on server 12, but they got the data from the domain controller. Let's assume they exfiltrated the NTDS DIT, for example, and some other stuff, and they got it from the server 01, but did not want to exfiltrate it from there. For that reason, they put it on server 12. Okay, and where was that whole thing exfiltrated to? Well, let's say to the Cobalt Strike server. And the file was, well, exfil.7zip, something like that, and the size in bytes was something like this. And the contents was s.dit security hive and stuff like that, right? Okay, so we know that now. We have an exfil time. The creation time means when it got to the staging system, so when the actual timestamp for that file was. Let's do that at 11 p.m. So it was lying around for a little bit longer. And then we have that fully filled. So obviously I want to have that here in the timeline as well, because the timeline is the only thing that propagates the reporting down here. And that's the one thing that you would be writing your report out of. Okay, so go back to exfiltration. You can right click that as well and just get that to the timeline. And now we have the exfiltration here as well. And as this is exfil, we also see that in the lateral movement tab. Oh, I got the direction wrong. Sorry for that. That means, no, I didn't set it at all. My mistake, sorry. And obviously it was this direction, right? From the server to the attacker controlled server. And this is what it is, right? So the attacker came, oh, I still have the mistake with the Citrix server. Attacker Citrix to the Citrix server. No, that's, let me see. Somewhere there is a mistake. The question is where? Oh, it's obviously not from attacker Citrix, but from the Citrix server to the streaming server here. That was my mistake. Okay, so now the story makes sense, right? They came in using Citrix, used one server to stream MSTSC. From that server, they got to many different machines. They staged some stuff on server 12 and exfiltrated it to the attacker Cobalt Strike server here. So that gives you a good picture that you can use right now if you want to, right? So that's information that we usually have within a couple of hours after starting the investigation, and we can already give the client that kind of information. So that's super cool and helps us a lot, to be honest. And it also helps if we put everything into the timeline to fill gaps, right? So in that case, sorry, I didn't put the other stuff into the timeline because I do not have any timing information, but let's put that one here for now. And we should have this one here. By the way, exfiltration is red because that tells them that it's really bad. So that's why I put it in red. And we really put that into reports, by the way. Okay. And my question is now, if they exfiltrated that already, like 2 hours before they ended the session, are we missing something in here? So it also helps me to understand if what we found so far is conclusive or if we might miss something. Okay, so this is what we use that for. And if we have enough activity of the attacker, it gives us, we do not have that here, but after a real case would have that, it gives us a histogram in which hours of the day the attacker was most active. That might potentially help you with some sort of attribution. Obviously, it could be a false flag operation as well, but that might help at least, right? So that's what we have here. Okay, so that's in a nutshell what that tool does for you. I didn't show you the MISP part yet. I think I'll do another video on that where we set up a test MISP and all that. But I think it's easy for you to figure out if you want to do that already. All you need to do is a URL, an API key, and an event ID that resembles your investigation. So you need to set up the event first, and then you can add that stuff. And if you have tools like that, for example, you would have MISP. Well, I can do that here now because I do not have that running. Okay. So this is it. Let me tell you a little bit about the roadmap. What's the plan for it? So by open sourcing, I hope to attract some people that help me developing that, and I'm totally happy with accepting pull requests and working them in. And on the roadmap, what I have is first of all web dev support, so that we can store the files on web dev servers. I'll probably make a different or separate video on that one. And another thing that I want to have is import functionality, CSV import functionality for all of those tabs here. And I wanted to have it in a way like Excel does it. So that means that you just open a file and it tells you, okay, these are the first 3 lines of that file, which column is which. And then you can just select that and it will run into that file. Something like that. Same goes for export. And another thing that's in there, and I'm actually very close to getting that to run, is reporting, so that you already get a pre-filled report template out of that. That you just need to fill with some prose to make the final report. But it basically relieves you of going through this data all the time while writing the report, because you will have that data already in the Word template or whatever kind of template you prefer, PDF, whatever. Okay, so this is on the roadmap. If you want to contribute to that, you can either contact me on Twitter, you can send me an email. Those are the usual things. So I definitely prefer Twitter for that one. And there's also a Slack chat that I can add you to, where we can discuss how we want to proceed with that project. And there are already people in there. So I expect that to grow as people start using that more. If you got any questions, just let me know. So thanks for listening. And I'm always happy if I receive any kind of feedback. So please let me know what you think. Thank you very much. Have a great day and bye-bye.